Most of you think you're ready. You've got a safe full of lead, a year's supply of freeze-dried calories, and maybe a survival straw you bought off an Instagram ad. But here's the cold, hard reality. The science of systemic collapse doesn't care about your shopping list. Look at the screen. This is a heat map of urban density versus supply chain nodes. In the United States, we live in a just-in-time economy. Every meal you eat was on a truck 1,500 miles away, just 48 hours ago. When the GPS satellites go dark or the grid takes a surge it can't recover from, that system doesn't just pause, it shatters. It's called entropy, and it's the most powerful force in the universe. Welcome to Cyber Rat. I'm not here to sell you fear, I'm here to give you the blueprints. While everyone else is panic buying toilet paper, we're analyzing the physics, chemistry, and psychology of the breakdown. Today, we are dissecting the 72-hour protocol. Why is it that in the wealthiest, most armed nation on Earth, 80% of the population will be functionally incapacitated within the first 3 solar cycles of a blackout? It's not a lack of bullets. It's a total failure of systems, thinking. Most Americans will fail the first 3 days because they're waiting for a rescue that's physically impossible to deliver. The greatest enemy isn't the disaster, the hunger, or the lack of power. The greatest enemy is the person standing next to you, or the one staring back at you in the mirror. Grab your gear and calibrate your mind. We're going deep into the hard science of why the first 72 hours are the deadliest, and how you can be the one who repairs the future while everyone else is still mourning the past. To understand why those first 3 days are a death trap, you have to understand the ghost in the machine. In the U.S., we've traded resilience for efficiency. We call it the just-in-time delivery model. It's a marvel of modern engineering, and it is also a structural suicide note. The average American supermarket carries enough inventory to feed its local zip code for exactly 3 days. And that's assuming people don't panic. The moment the check engine light flickers on the national power grid, the clock starts ticking. Within 6 hours, the digital payment systems, Visa, MasterCard, the very concept of swiping, will likely face a catastrophic bottleneck. Without the digital handshake of the internet, the fuel pumps don't turn on. Without fuel, the trucks, those massive arteries of our civilization, stop moving. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's logistics. It's the entropy of the supply chain. We're talking about a nation that depends on a fragile web of GPS-synchronized logistics just to get a loaf of bread to a shelf in suburban Ohio. If you aren't within walking distance of your resources, when the clock hits 0, you are statistically out of stock. Most people will spend the first 24 hours in a state of normalcy bias, convinced the lights will flicker back on by dinner. By 48 hours, they'll be checking their phones every 30 seconds, desperate for a signal that isn't coming, watching their battery percentages drop like a countdown to irrelevance. By 72 hours, the physiological shift happens. Hunger moves from an annoyance to a biological driver. This is where the hard science gets ugly. When the local water tower's backup pumps fail and the pressure drops, the social contract doesn't just bend, it snaps. At Cyber Rat, we look at this as a system failure. If your survival plan relies on a 5G signal or a grocery store door being unlocked, you aren't prepared. You're just a passenger on a sinking ship. You need to realize that the convenience you've spent your life paying for is actually your greatest tactical weakness. In the first 72 hours, the system won't save you, because the system is the first thing that dies. Now, let's talk about the hardware between your ears. You can have all the gear in the world, but if your brain isn't patched for reality, you're just a loot box for someone else. There's a psychological phenomenon we call normalcy bias. It's a survival mechanism gone wrong. When a catastrophic event hits, the average brain spends the first 12 hours trying to convince itself that everything is fine. You see it every time a hurricane hits the coast. People standing on their porches watching the water rise thinking, it's never been this bad before. Surely it'll stop now. That hesitation, that's the sound of your window of opportunity slamming shut by the 36-hour mark. The normalcy bias starts to rot into what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. This is when the American psyche begins to fracture. We are a society conditioned for instant gratification. We press a button, we get coffee, we tap a screen, we get a ride. When the on-demand world stops demanding, the amygdala, the lizard brain, takes the wheel. This is where we see the three-way split in human behavior. First, you have the frozen. This is 70% of the population. They aren't bad people. They're just waiting for an emergency alert that won't buzz, waiting for a National Guard truck that's stuck in a 300-mile gridlock. They stay in their homes until their water runs out, paralyzed by the hope that the system is still coming to save them. Then you have the panic. These are the 15% who realize the system is dead and lose their minds. They are the ones causing the pileups on the I-95, the ones turning gas stations into war zones over the last gallon of premium. They aren't thinking, they're reacting. And then there's the final 15%, the adaptive, the ones who saw the signal in the noise. At CyberRat, we don't just teach you to be the 15%, we teach you to survive them. Because by hour 72, the social contract isn't just a piece of paper, it's a memory. When the hunger hits and the lights stay dark, the person next door isn't your neighbor anymore. They are a desperate biological organism. Remember, the greatest enemy isn't the blackout. It's the denial in your own head that tells you it can't happen here. It is happening. The only question is, are you watching the collapse or are you navigating it? So the grid is a memory and the grocery store is a combat zone. Now what? This is where we separate the preppers from the engineers. Most people think survival is about how much stuff you can hoard. At CyberRat, we know survival is about how much energy you can manipulate. We don't buy into disposable consumer tech. We pivot to hard science, the kind of low-tech, high-durability systems that actually survive the friction of reality. Let's talk power. Your fancy lithium power station is great until the internal circuit board fries or the cycle life hits a wall. If you want to talk about forever tech, you look at the nickel-iron battery, the Edison cell. It's heavy, it's bulky, and it's chemically indestructible. You can overcharge it, freeze it, or leave it empty for 20 years, and it will still take a charge from a scavenged solar panel. That's not a consumer product. That's a generational asset. And while everyone is burning their fuel to bug out into a 300-mile traffic jam, we analyze the physics of the fortress city. In the first 72 hours, movement is often a liability. Kinetic energy, driving a 3-ton SUV through a panicked crowd, is a high-risk gamble. The science of survival says you manage your thermal envelope where you are. We're talking about aerogel blankets for nanoscale heat retention and gravity-fed filtration systems that don't require a single watt of power. You need to understand the repair part of our mission. When a system breaks, it's just a collection of parts. A dead microwave contains a high-voltage transformer you can use to build an arc welder. A downed telecommunications line is a source of high-grade copper and steel tension wire. While the rest of the world sees a junk pile, the CyberRat sees a hardware store. The 72-hour mark is when the amateurs run out of batteries. It's when their fancy gadgets turn into expensive paperweights. Your goal isn't to have the most stuff, it's to have the most function. Because when the high-tech world shatters, the person who understands the low-tech principles of thermodynamics and mechanical advantage is the only one who truly owns their future. We don't just survive the collapse, we strip it for parts. 72 hours. That's all it takes for the veneer of modern civilization to peel back and reveal the raw, entropic truth underneath. By the end of day 3, The first wave of the collapse is over. The shelves are empty, the sirens have gone quiet because the fuel ran out, and the frozen have finally realized that no one is coming to save them. This is the moment where your life either becomes a tragedy or a masterclass in resilience. The 72-hour protocol isn't just about making it to day 4. It's about ensuring that when you reach that milestone, you aren't exhausted, dehydrated, or desperate. It's about having your systems, your water, your low-tech power, and your mental fortress running at peak efficiency while the rest of the world is just starting to panic. We don't fear the breakdown because we've already mapped its geometry. We know that every failure in the macro system is an opportunity for the micro system to thrive. But remember, information without action is just noise. You can watch every video on this channel, but if you haven't tested your gravity filter or checked the chemistry of your battery bank, you're still just a spectator. The American dream of infinite convenience is a beautiful lie, but the reality of mechanical self-reliance is a much more powerful truth. If you're the type of person who looks at a broken world and sees a puzzle to be solved, then you belong here. We're the ones who stay calm when the lights go out because we know exactly how to turn them back on our own terms. Subscribe to Cyber Rat and join the network. We're going to dive deeper into the hardware, the hacks, and the hard science of the end of the world as we know it. The clock is always ticking, the grid is always aging, and the system is always one bad day away from a reset. Don't just be a survivor. Be the person who repairs the future. I'm the Cyber Rat. I'll see you in the next analysis, if you're still online.